say that, I mean Jake wouldn't want to quit. He wanted to go.
Hey, Ray. Never went down, Ray. He never got me down, Ray. You hear me? Never got me down. Yeah? See? Look.
It has often been observed when someone has lived a long life that they have outlived their friends. Sometimes longevity is measured by how many doctors they have buried. In the case of Jake LaMotta, who died in 2017 at the age of 95, he managed to outlive his reputation. If Jake wasn't, he certainly was very close to being a sociopath. He was a vicious guy who struck fear into all who knew him when growing up. Growing up during the rough years when LaMotta was a kid in New York City was tough. It led a lot of young men to a life of crime. Most were very tough and quick with their fists, but with Jake, he carried it further. For example, when robbing a jeweler he knew, he wasn't satisfied with just scaring the guy and running off with the goods. No, he also had to nearly beat the man to death with a pipe. He also physically abused his wives. Jake truly seemed to take pleasure in causing physical harm to others. He had a sadistic streak in him. This character trait, if I may call it that, was featured in the Martin Scorsese film, The Raging Bull. It is an ugly story about a vicious and cruel man. The movie made LaMotta a household name again long after his boxing days were over. He never disputed his characterization as depicted in the movie. A few years earlier, he had written a book with the same title, and in it, he didn't hold back about his life. It isn't that he was proud of what he had done, but he didn't exactly appear to be ashamed by it either. Strangely enough, even after the movie Raging Bull came out, somewhere along the line, Jake turned from vicious sociopath into an elder statesman of boxing. I have to admit, when I would see him years later wearing his cowboy hat, he did look like a lovable character. I guess that can happen if you live long enough. While Jake was successful in the boxing ring, his animalistic behavior destroyed his life outside. I am not speaking ill of the dead. I honestly believe Jake would not have a problem with this, as he was always honest about who he was. I might also add that Jake was not a bully in the sense Mike Tyson was. Jake was crazy, but unlike bullies in the Tyson mold, he had no quit in him. He could not be intimidated physically. Tyson's will could be broken, not so for LaMotta. I am not sure if that was guts or insanity, but for anyone in boxing, it is a trait that is very much admired. LaMotta is often underappreciated for his boxing skills. His reputation as a slugger is well-deserved, but he was also a brilliant tactician. Contrary to popular belief, Jake did not just walk in with his chin sticking out. He was a master at rolling with punches. If you look closely at many of his fights, you may at first think he is absorbing some brutal punches. Look a little closer and you will see how he is moving his head as those punches are landing. This head movement lessens the impact of the blows. Jake likened it to the way a baseball player will pull back his glove when catching a ball in order to better absorb the force of the ball. Jake was also a master at feinting, parrying, and slipping punches. And it should be noted, he had an excellent left jab. He showed how effective the jab could be when thrown from a crouch. Yes, LaMotta was a true artist in the ring. He was the top middleweight contender for years before getting a title shot. There are a couple of versions of the story why he didn't get a shot earlier. They are similar. One has it that Jake wouldn't play ball with the mob. The other has it that the mob wanted nothing to do with him as he was too crazy. At any rate, they finally did business. The deal was Jake would throw a fight against Billy Fox and then later get a title shot. He did throw the fight, but not very convincingly. 19 months later, he finally got his chance at the title, winning the belt from Marcel Cerdan. Jake was past his prime at this point in his career. He would hold on to the title for less than 2 years before losing it to his old rival, Sugar Ray Robinson. He would fight off and on for just a few more years before retiring. Jake LaMotta participated in the film's production, personally training De Niro to portray him during his lean and fighting fit years, when LaMotta fought Sugar Ray Robinson a half dozen times. He won once and lost 5 times. Robinson was best man at LaMotta's 6th wedding. But LaMotta was still surprised when he saw Raging Bull. He told the New York Times, "I kind of look bad in it." 26 years had passed between LaMotta's retirement from the fight game and the release of Raging Bull. He had performed bad stand-up comedy in dodgy nightclubs, which he sometimes owned, and he served time on a chain gang after being convicted of introducing an underage girl to a man at one of his clubs. He pursued a sporadic career as an actor with minute roles in The Hustler in 1961, but none of these brought him the sort of attention he craved. No one knew it then, but when Raging Bull came along, boxing's long tumble from prominence as a mainstream sport had already begun. Aside from Mike Tyson, who, like LaMotta, would serve time in prison and enjoy an unlikely second career as an entertainer, there would be no one to rival the great heavyweights of decades past. Jake LaMotta will most likely be remembered fondly by many. He certainly should be remembered as a great fighter and one of the top middleweight champions of all time. However, we should not forget that being a champion in the ring does not necessarily make you one out of it. On the outside, LaMotta seems to be nothing but a monster who beats his wife and ruins all of his relationships with the people he loves. He yells at people, manipulates them, beats his fellow boxers brutally, and sees nothing wrong with what he does until the end of the film. LaMotta is also seen as very egotistical, as shown when he makes various comments while working at his nightclub, as well as when he chooses to lose a fight because the mob are helping him win. Jake is also shown to be driven by sex, as he cheats on his wife with a very young woman, introduces a very young girl to pimps that he has connections with, and thinks women are nothing but something he can have sex with. However, on the inside, Jake is an extremely insecure and paranoid man. During the beginning of the film, Jake is shown to truly care for his brother and only becomes paranoid after hearing about Joey beating Salvi after it was implied Vicky was going to have sex with him. Not to mention, throughout the entire film, Jake is shown to only do the masculine things in order to prove to other people how aggressive and tough around other people. However, the most important part of LaMotta's character is his inability to express his anger, which is shown throughout the entire film, thus the name Raging Bull. The best example for this side of LaMotta is when he is put in prison, and the only way to get rid of his anger is by punching the wall and screaming, until he gives up, sits on his bed, and cries the words, "I'm not an animal," as well as, "I'm not that bad." Overall, LaMotta is most definitely the most complex character in a Scorsese film, with both trying to show his anger to other people, despite not being able to control his anger. "You know what's the greatest sin in the world?" LaMotta asks his nephew on the Raging Bull commentary track. He repeats the question several times, and then he answered, "Hurting your fellow man."
Too much sex is no good for you. A little bit once in a while is not bad, but too much is no good.